everybody, to the Thursday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. We pride ourselves on this show on not discussing rumors. And there's been a rumor that's been going on for about 3,000 years. And
Absolutely. There's a lot of chatter online about the 72 virgins that the suicide bombers get when they go to heaven. And it's actually a mistranslation. The actual text is Bismillahir Rahman. You will get 172-year-old virgin when you come to heaven. Death to America. Praise be to Allah. So they're getting 172-year-old virgin when they blow themselves up. It's amazing that people still fall for that.
I also corrected him, though, and I said, go on. Nowhere does it state the sex of the virgin.
But there is something to be said for with Hezbollah, we using pagers created a lot of virgins. So, maybe it'll be one of those guys.
Actually, talking about the pagers, it was hilarious that the narrative that the mainstream media, especially the BBC, was trying to take when the pager explosion went off, which was one of the most targeted attacks against a terrorist organization in the history of mankind, where they blew up only the pagers of actual terrorists. And the BBC's narrative was how many Lebanese people are in danger because Israel's randomly indiscriminately blowing up pagers in the country. One of the most successful and targeted attacks against a terrorist organization, which they're going to be teaching about for many years to come. And the BBC tried to tie it to medical staff. Oh, medical staff still needs to use pagers in Lebanon. They get the beep and then they have to go to emergency surgery. Completely fabricated.
It's almost like they were outing themselves that they used hospitals as bases, wasn't it? The word indiscriminate is one of those words that's been used so many times during this war and always incorrectly or just straight up as a lie. The idea of saying that attack was indiscriminate basically tells you everything you need to know about the use of that.
It's one of my favorite things to push back on. Even my lefty friends, here's how it starts. They go, Israel has a right to defend itself, but the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza is unacceptable. I'm like, how do you define indiscriminate? Is it the number of bombs dropped? Because that doesn't tell you anything. If I dropped 1,000 bombs in the middle of the ocean, what are you talking about? So is it the number of dead? They go, oh, yeah. It's definitely the number of dead. I said, okay, what's the civilian to combatant ratio? And then the conversation goes dead. They don't want to hear about that. They don't want to do any kind of critical analysis.
I also always ask this question. I say, well, okay, you're going to give a number. Here's the red line. Once you kill this number of people, now we're going to say you're committing genocide. So you're basically writing the instruction manual for future terrorists. How many civilians do you have to use as human shields in order for the world to let the terrorists go? You basically given them a roadmap from now on. Okay, it's 100,000? No problem. We'll build a bunch of tunnels under the kindergartens and the hospitals, and we'll make sure all the children are strapped to the fronts of us, and now you can't kill us anymore.
Well, that's the incentive that has been going on in every single Israeli conflict, where they kidnap a soldier like Gilad Shalit, and then they get 1,000 of their bad guys back. So then they come back with October 7th, and they kidnap 100 and some odd hostages because they want to get everyone.
Well said, both of you. But let's get straight to the news because this just came out. Trump warns Israel's strike in Iran could happen amid Middle East evacuation, nuclear negotiations. The U.S. withdrew non-essential embassy staff workers from Iraq on Thursday. Another sign that trouble is expected. The State Department also offered departure options to staffers in Bahrain and Kuwait, while Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the voluntary departure of military dependents from across the Middle East. This is a massive story. They're having another one of these idiotic negotiation deals. I believe it's Sunday. And Golan, he's basically saying, we're not going to be the ones doing the attacking. We're going to back Israel up, but Israel will be doing the attacking. And that's perfectly fine with us.
This is one of those things where a little while ago he came out and he said, I spoke to the Israelis and I told them don't attack Iran and all of that. Okay, so we discussed at the time, what's the strategy here? Why is he saying this publicly? Well, I think he was saying it publicly to kind of pat the Iranians on the head and say, see, I'm doing what you want. But we all know that I got a junkyard dog. And junkyard dogs sometimes can't be controlled. It's a nice country you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, right? So now he's saying, I had that conversation. He's using the previous conversation as part of the strategy. I told them directly not to do it, you guys, but I don't know if I can stop them. I mean, Israel crazy. I hope we sign something soon because I would hate to see what would happen if these guys who I can't control just do what they do and are lethal when they do it.
So, men, last night they posted on their X account, the Islamic Republic of Iran, we are ready.
Great. So, this is the same strategy the Trump administration is using in Ukraine. When he went to Zelensky and he said, listen, just shut up, sit down, stop saying crazy things against the Russians. You're not bringing Vladimir Putin to the Hague to face war crimes. Do you want to get to the end? And then he's turning to Putin saying, listen, the entire European Union and these crazy Ukrainians really want to go after you hard. I'm holding them back. Let's get to a peace agreement. It's the same thing. He goes to the guys that are supposedly the ally and saying, listen, step back. And then he goes to the other side saying, look, those guys really are itching to do this thing. Let's get to a peace agreement. So he's doing the same thing with Iran. I don't think that they truly want to end their nuclear program. There's a number of reasons why they don't. The main one is they look at North Korea and nobody's doing anything to North Korea because they have a nuke. So the lesson there is if you could get that bomb, then you have all the power. And they are racing to a bomb. These negotiations had, in my opinion, a 10% chance of succeeding, and it looks like it's falling apart. As far as attacking Iran, I would love to see the U.S. backing Israel, but I do not want to see any U.S. boots on the ground. I think Israel could handle this one. America, the allies, should be providing defense like they did the last time Iran attacked Israel, and then give Israel the munitions, and Israel will go in there and take this out. And not just take out the nuclear program, but they should be taking out senior leadership in the Iranian government and allow the people the chance to form an actual government that's for the people, by the people.
What you're saying is what Trump is saying. We don't want American boots on the ground. I think all of us are in agreement on that. And I think most Americans are in agreement on that. We want to avoid that whenever possible. And I think the language that he's using right now is actually being very clear about that being the case. I also just want to point out Donald Trump, while he is a statesman and the president, he's also one of the best comedians that exists and also a mob boss. And I think the way he's using language right now in this particular negotiation is one of the funniest things I've seen in a very long time. I'm going to quote a couple of things. Well, I don't want to say imminent, but it looks like it's something that could very well happen. Whoa, okay, that's really subtle. Cool. Look, it's very simple. It's not complicated. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So to avoid the conflict, Iran's going to have to negotiate a little bit tougher, meaning they have to give us some things they're not willing to give us right now. I want to have an agreement with Iran. We're fairly close to an agreement. I think it can work as long as there's a chance that the Israelis won't do it. I hope they don't do it. It's like everything is, wait, are you saying they will do it? No, I'm saying, I hope they don't do it over here. Everything he's saying is the best thing I've ever heard. I love it.
You're completely right. And today they vowed to ramp up enrichment after UN watchdog finds it breached nuke safeguards. I had this discussion yesterday, Mend, with a friend of mine on the phone. It was very interesting what he said, and it brought me back to when we didn't arm the Iranians in 2015 when Obama didn't support the protesters. Right now, what we're witnessing in Gaza with Israel, as we discussed yesterday, supporting the Bedouins and other armed fighters to fight Hamas, that might be the only answer to fixing the problem. We can't force people to want freedom, but maybe these are the new generation of leaders. Maybe they will take the mantle and save that region.
Absolutely. But what we're seeing is that it's always the guys with the guns that control what goes on there. So there's going to be an opportunity. Let's talk about Iran for a second, then we can move on to Gaza. But there's going to be an opportunity in Iran if Israel strikes the Iranian nuclear program and they're able to take out some of the top leaders in Tehran, then the people, which are the finest people in the world and they do not ideologically align with the regime, they have a chance then to overthrow that regime and finally gain the freedom. Iran was a beautiful country in the 70s, so that can happen again. And as far as Gaza goes, again, it's the same thing. Hamas had a stranglehold on that enclave. During this war, after a lot of Hamas was taken out, that's when you start to see the people go onto the streets and protest against them and saying, release the hostages to end this war. That is what's needed. You need to create the space for the people to rise up. The people just cannot rise up on their own.
Well said. And Golan, I think it's also extremely important with something like Starlink, because this is offering internet access to people who would normally not have internet access. And if the youth in Gaza, the youth in Iran, see what freedom really is, they could fight for it.
This is exactly right. By the way, this counts for Iran. This counts for Gaza. This counts for any place where the people are being oppressed by a tyrannical government, because ultimately the information superhighway that exists now is something that can be used for this. They tried this in the past, and sometimes it backfires. It does, and certainly amongst groups that are not ready for it. But the regimes in Iran and Gaza and North Korea and other places like that, they fear more than bombs, I think. They fear the open internet. They fear things like Starlink. They fear people connecting and being knowledgeable and being informed and being able to communicate with one another. What's the first thing they do? Every time one of these regimes rises up, they kill the internet. It's the first thing they do. I was watching something just the other day when they were talking about in North Korea, if you're typing on your phone, there are certain words you type and the autocorrect, it doesn't correct the spelling. It corrects the meaning of what you're texting. So that's the first thing they do. They block social media. They shut down phones. It's just dictatorship 101. We have to make sure that we keep everybody dumb. We keep everybody in line with what we want them to believe. We can indoctrinate them like they do in Gaza with the kids, indoctrinate them into thinking you all basically are walking time bombs, and that's what you should be proud of. They're just organized as weapons, right? So when you think about something like Starlink, I think is essentially the front line of freedom. You beam it over Iran, you beam it into Gaza, you let the people speak, you let them see what the world is doing. Someone said a long time ago, Judah, it may have even been you, in a conversation we had long before we started this podcast. You said, you want them to stop trying to kill Americans and destroy Western civilization? Give them McDonald's, give them Netflix, and everybody's suddenly going to shut the fuck up. And this is step one when it comes to all of it.
And I also think it's important that we stop looking at the past. The past isn't always indicative of what the future will hold. And we have to have this belief and hope that things change, that things can change. And my friend's point was essentially he sees that as more of a hope for peace in the world than the European Union shifting their stance on Israel and that region. To the next point is nearly half of London's social housing properties are inhabited by migrants.
Not just migrants. The UK taxpayers are paying for these invaders that have come from the Middle East. And you have, I've seen these interviews, you have a single guy with his 7 wives, and each one got a separate house. That's all taxpayer funded by the UK taxpayers. It's not normal. It's not sustainable. Just to put this in perspective, the entire third world cannot be absorbed by the first world. So if you're talking about open borders and just allowing people to come to your countries, you are going to not elevate their lives. You're just going to deteriorate the lives for your own citizens. And the first job of any government is to protect your citizenry. And they are not doing this. They are absolutely falling down. And the math just doesn't math. It doesn't work. You can't just let people in and expect your society to continue. So they're destroying their societies, and they're not helping the entire world. They're helping what, 2-3%? So they're destroying their own citizenry, their own populations, and they're not fixing anything. What you want to do is go out to where these problems are. As Sam Kinison once said, plant the crops where there's famine. Like, help these people where they are. You don't have to take them all in.
There's something that people aren't talking about, which is the social housing is designed for working class Brits. That's the whole point. It's like our welfare umbrella. You put your taxes in, you butt your back working. The idea is for this to be available to the British people, not to the migrants. This isn't a migrant program. It is literally London's social housing. And just about 50% of it is gone. Basically, it's a slap in the face to all working Brits, all people who think, what if I need this? What if your kids need affordable housing? Sorry, too late. Mahmoud's got it now. A guy who showed up yesterday. I'm going to use a word that I know people get real weird about. That's not immigration anymore. That's replacement. And you're seeing that not just in London, but in other places in the world as well, when they are deliberately coming in and taking all the welfare, taking all the housing, taking all the social benefits. And it's something that basically tells everybody else who is a natural citizen, a local, sorry, you count less. That cannot be the way it works.
And that's not how it's supposed to work. So the way it's supposed to work is the majority of your social programs are supposed to go for your citizens, the people that have paid taxes, that have somehow fallen through the cracks, and they need help. They need assistance. It's a safety net. A tiny fraction of that is supposed to be set aside for actual refugees, people that are fleeing for their lives from places like North Korea. What these people have done is they just hijacked a great working system, which was a social safety net for their citizens, and they've opened it up to foreigners. And the same thing is happening here in California, where they're using free Medicaid and free healthcare, free housing, everything for illegal migrants. And a lot of these people that are here are not fleeing from anything that would be deemed as refugee status. A lot of them are economic migrants, which is fine. You need to try to get a better life for your family. Do it the legal way. Go through a proper crossing, and you should not be a burden on society. That was one of the big qualifiers for immigration, was that they do not pose a burden to the society that they are joining.
And the other thing about it is assimilation. I mean, this is one of those things that people don't talk about enough, but all these groups that come in and do not make any attempt to become part of society. In London right now, you're talking about 3.6 billion pounds being spent on an annual basis, yearly, on people who don't even try to speak the language or do anything cultural. And that's not including the 4.7 billion pounds that are being spent on migrant hotels. That's literally 4-star hotels where people are just being put up that the citizens are paying for in taxes. And all of it kind of comes down to one thing. And I don't want to put it all on one group, but it's something that now has been documented. There are reports on this. You can look them up all over the place. It's called Islamic welfare fraud. Islamic welfare fraud is a major issue in London, but also in other places where you have these polygamous households who are collecting benefits multiple times over. And that's not integration, that's exploitation.
Absolutely. Immigration without assimilation is an invasion. It's as simple as that. And for 1600 years, the Islamic countries have tried to invade Europe, and they couldn't do it with their armies. But they figured out through immigration they can. Here in California, we are spending billions on care programs for these migrants that don't deserve it. And the state itself is in a deficit.
Which brings us back full circle. And Golan, you're an avid, voracious listener and watcher of the BBC. And I'm sure they reported this story this morning that Hamas attacks bus of workers from American Aid Group in Gaza. There were 5 deaths at least and hostages possible. Now, it's important that these aren't Israelis that were on the bus. These are Arabs or workers. These were people just trying to help, and they were attacked by Hamas. And you're not going to see this story reported anywhere. So you try to get aid in, you lose. You don't try to get aid in, you lose. What do you do?
First of all, I should say, because I do read all of this stuff, this was reported in the BBC. Although the way it was reported is a little trick of journalism. So I'm going to detour from the actual story for a second to give a little lesson. I used to teach a class called Bias in Media. And as a professor, it's one of my favorite classes I've ever taught. And it was very instructional for me in terms of how I read things. I used to bring in newspapers from all over the world for my students, looking at the same news story and how it was reported in different ways. There are certain patterns that emerge. One is when they tell you, before they tell you the information, who's giving you the information, it means they're trying to make you skeptical. So, for instance, if they say, Trump says, whatever they say after that is now suspect because you heard Trump say, oh, Trump says it. Whatever they're about to tell you, you're already not listening. But if they're like, 200 people died, you're like, oh my God. And then it's like, Hamas said. It's like, I don't even care who said it. 200 people are dead. Oh my God. So the idea is to manipulate you subtly, and it allows them to claim that they are being non-biased. What? I said the same thing. Here I said Israel said. Here I said afterwards Hamas said. What's the difference? But it always actually psychologically does make a difference. Why do I mention this? Because the BBC did mention this story. What was their headline? U.S.-backed aid group says, well, we already know what bullshit this is. Hamas killed at least 8 Palestinian staff in bus attack. Wait a minute. That's not what the news story said when it wrote about it in other places. It talked about the Americans who were running the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It also, in addition to that, does another journalistic trick where in paragraph 3 of the news story, it says the BBC cannot independently verify this statement. And Hamas has not commented, but it previously denied it had threatened the foundation's staff. So what information are they deciding to keep and what information are they deciding to share with you? How early in the story are they putting it? All of these things are things that you need to pay attention to when you are being fed information by places that are supposedly nonpartisan. The BBC did tell this story, and the way they told this story made you suspect that it was true, and then made you assume that it was a lie.
Again, as we always say, people aren't actually reading the story. They might read the click and they might read the first paragraph, and we're here to give you the third and fourth and fifth paragraphs. But let's move on to what's going on, because obviously the riots and the looting are going to spread. They're going to Washington State right now. They're on their summer tour. And that's really, Golan, what this reminds me of. It's become a tour. And it's not Lollapalooza. It's like Riot Palooza or Terrorist Palooza. And they're going to be doing this as much as they can, whenever they can. And Trump sees this. I mean, listen, the playbook was 2020. He knows exactly what's going to happen. And Americans know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm telling you, we're seeing something that we didn't witness in 2020. We forget everybody was home during the lockdowns. So these nut jobs had free reign to do whatever they wanted. Well, people are outside now. They want to have a good summer. They're not in the mood to be interrupted by crazy people rioting and looting businesses that they normally shop at. So go on, kudos to Trump and the DOJ and everybody for cracking down on this immediately, but it's spreading.
Not only is it spreading, it's interesting where and how it's spreading. So when you're watching whatever's happening in Washington, it's a little different than what's happening in New York or in Los Angeles, in blue states, in red states. When you're talking about what's going on in New York, for instance, they just had this situation where there were 86 arrests in New York. Don't know if we necessarily saw that coming, but I'm really enjoying the fact that they're cracking down. Thanks to President Trump, the lawbreakers faced consequences. So you had rich kids and kafiyas and balaclavas, these Sarah Lawrence dropouts causing trouble. At this point, like you said, it's their, what do you call it, the summer tour?
Yes.
That's what it feels like. It feels like these kids, they're all cosplaying the Hamptons privilege, doing the typical leftist violence thing where they know they're not going to get in trouble. One of them, Rachel Schreiber, this Hamptons heiress brat little shitbag turned activist, quote unquote activist, because that's what's cool and popular. And she knows the consequences are few at this point. She got arrested. Her mugshot is her smiling. What is she doing? She was throwing bottles at the NYPD. But you know what? Under Trump, she's actually going to be held accountable. I want to see what happens next. And that makes me excited, because what happened last time when everyone burned down the cities, and then the vice president of the United States bailed them out, let everybody know, come and get it, time to riot, time to loot. You want to burn a cop car? Let's go. Not only is it fun, we're going to make sure we protect its autonomous zone. No more. Under Trump, there are going to be consequences, and I'm here for it.
That's a great point, what he just said, man. And I want you to go on that point, because essentially Trump is remasculating the police. So we're seeing arrests happen in Los Angeles. We're seeing arrests happen in New York. And now the police have the protection of the United States government. They're not terrified of losing their jobs, losing their pensions. The police protect us. They should never have to fear losing their livelihoods. And I think it's incredible what they're doing. But go ahead, man.
There was a very important point that Golan made right there. Kamala Harris gave money to the organizations that was bailing out these rioters, these people that were burning down the cities. She endorsed it. She backed them. And now we finally have adults in the room that are saying none of this. You want to peacefully protest? Absolutely. It was a really funny line where there was a reporter in the White House press briefing room that asked if Trump would have a problem with people peacefully protesting. And Caroline Levitt said, why would he have a problem with that? That's a stupid question, and moved on, which is exactly how it should be done. These people are morons. The bottom line is law and order. If you peacefully protest, absolutely nothing wrong with that. You start burning down people's businesses and firebombing people's cars and houses and places of worship or whatever else they're doing, absolutely not. You go to jail. What needs to be done now is the federal government must enact RICO. It's the Racketeering Act. It's how they took down the mafia. It takes down the entire network, because if they just arrest these little ants that are out on the street, most of them are just paid hired radicals, and they get bailed out by the higher ups. You need to go after the higher ups. Where's the money coming from? Treat it like it's an insurrection. These are anti-American riots, and they need to be smashed. They need to be quashed so they don't turn around in the next election and come back out.
There's a word that has now been overused and has been misused, like most of the words, frankly, that I hear from a lot of the people on the left. That word is insurrection. What's happening now, we can pretend it's just a peaceful protest. We can even pretend it's just a riot, by the way. If you really want to close your eyes and just believe it's chaos or it's anarchy, it's not. These are coordinated uprisings. This is organized to a T. And I call them either domestic insurgencies or domestic insurrections. I know that right now that's a word that has a lot of weight to it because of the January 6th, circus that occurred. But if it truly is that, then what you're talking about, men, with the RICO Act is absolutely right. The idea is it's racketeering, fine, but really it's about corrupt organization. That's exactly who is organizing these protests, these riots, these things that are burning down our cities and trying to enact lawlessness nationwide. And if that's what it is, then it's a criminal enterprise. Bottom line is there is no reason why the government shouldn't do what Trump has already started by investigating who's financing this, who's behind it. Like you said, a lot of these people are paid to be there. We see that on a regular basis when they do man on the street interviews and they ask questions and the people have no idea why they're there. We have found on the internet that's already been outed, even after they tried to scrub them, posts where they say, here's how much you're going to get paid. We need people to wear this and wear that, show up on this day. It's like a casting call. This isn't about First Amendment expression. We're past that. The moment you throw a brick, the moment you block a highway, the moment you torch a Waymo car, you're not a protester, you're a domestic terrorist, and whoever's financing you needs to be brought down.
Turning Point, which is a great organization, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, they had a great quote. They said, imagine protesting a country that you broke into, waving the flag of the country that you refuse to live in.
Brilliant. And for people that are not familiar with Charlie Kirk, go to Turning Point USA. He's absolutely fantastic. He's trying to listen. Trump got a lot of the young voters. A lot of that has to do with Charlie Kirk. And so, again, I go back to the point where you never know where change is going to happen. For the longest time, conservatives gave up on the youth vote. They gave up on the inner city vote. And then you have a guy like Trump that comes in and says, I'm not going to play by that playbook. I'm going to get every vote I can. Moving on, Trump is trying to, especially with California, he's trying to save California from itself. He's trying to save a lot of American cities from themselves, even if they don't want to. Trump signs a bill blocking California gas-powered vehicle ban, ending California's EPA power grab that will jumpstart the American auto and RV manufacturing. Golan, it's also important to note that people that live outside California, we pay almost double in gas prices what the rest of the country does because they've concocted a whole scheme of, obviously they high tax it, but in the middle of the year, they change the blend. It's like a coffee. What they do, it's a new blend we get in the summer and a new blend we get in the winter. And I really think it's amazing that he's trying to just protect us because we're failing here.
Imagine being forced to drive a $60,000 electric vehicle that you didn't want, that you probably can't afford, and that doesn't work in cold weather or in overcast days. There's something ridiculous about it. Like I have a hybrid. Okay, I love my hybrid car. It's wonderful. The fact that it's a hybrid car means that it has both a internal combustion engine as well as an electric component to it. That made more sense to me. The idea of them completely killing things, especially, and men, I think you'll appreciate this because I understand how you and your family work. I'm getting the sense of it. You, like me, are people who like to travel, like to go places, like to do things. My family, we travel on a regular basis. Now, before my son was born, it was constant flights. By the time my daughter was 2 years old, she'd been on 60 international flights. My son, though, has never been on a plane because we're in Europe, and going from place to place in Europe is super easy. You drive, but you can't drive to all the places we want to go if we had to charge the car every 5 minutes. Now, maybe in the future, when the technology changes, when every corner has a charging station and the charging stations are less money, et cetera, maybe it'll make sense. But for right now, for us to go ahead and jam this through, to shove it down everybody's throat, it makes no sense. And who will win in that regard? You're talking about who manufactures these things, or at least the components of it. The majority of it right now is done in China. It's not done in the United States. So we're handing something over to another country. In addition to that, there's something else that people don't talk about. It's not like it magically charges itself. You plug the car into the wall, and then electricity charges the car. Where's the electricity coming from? No pollution happening as a result of the electricity? The massive amount of electricity that goes up? I used to live in California. And I remember a number of times when we had really hot days and everyone had to turn off their AC and they were saying, hey, we're going to do rolling blackouts. And all the people who had electric vehicles couldn't leave the house I'm sorry. This is just about saying we are going to tell you through green tyranny what is or isn't happening. This isn't about common sense. And the fact that Trump is now basically body slamming this insane war on gas powered vehicles is the only logical thing to do. So I think kudos to him.
I want to just share a funny story because this actually happened with Mend, who's a former Tesla owner. And to your point, Elon Musk actually agrees with you 100%. But Mend was taking his family on a trip. I think you drove across the country, Mend, in your Tesla, and he mapped it out for me. He was showing me how long it took to get from here to there.
Well, here's the deal is that if you let it naturally grow like any other industry, then it'll take adaptation as the technology gets better and people will want to have whatever it is, the cheapest and
Great
best
point.
technology out there. But these guys are not doing that. They are forcing it down everybody's throats. As far as driving cross country, yes, I am a former Tesla owner. We did a cross country drive. And what we realized was when we lived in Toronto, Canada, it was really easy. We didn't do much driving. We would go once in a while up to the mountains. That was not a big deal. But for the most part, we were in the city and getting around in the city in an electric car. If you have a charger at home, no big deal. Once we did that cross-country drive, we noticed that range anxiety is absolutely real. What you do have to worry about is rolling resistance, how much stuff you put in your car, cross-country drive. We had a lot of stuff in the car. So as soon as you got on the highway, it would say, you're going to make it to your next charging station with 20% battery left. Great, that sounds good. Start driving and it says, oh, you better slow down to 70 because you're not going to make it to your destination. Then it says, you better slow down to 60. Next thing you know, I have the air conditioning off, the radio's off. I'm telling everybody in the car, don't fart, don't talk, don't do anything because we need to make it to this charging station. And we would get there with literally 1 or 2% left on the battery.
Golan, it's one of my favorite stories. And I also love how he says Toronto, Canada, not to be confused with Toronto, Ukraine. I also think what you said was a brilliant point that we can't force these things on society. We have to allow it to naturally progress. It's like if you said to the Wright brothers, you got to build the jet. That's we never would have gotten to the jet. Moving on, I wanted to finish this out with Men's favorite topic. And I really have to give him his props on this because it's not just the legacy media that was going after tariffs. It's a lot of the Republican cabal. So if you look at the New York Post, Fox News, Wall Street Journal, they are consistently on a daily basis talking about the dangers of tariffs. So they're getting it from the left Mend and they're getting it from conservative legacy media. And we're learning today, Trump wasn't that wrong, was he, man?
Looks like there's a trade deal happening with China. And where are we going to land with this trade deal? So it looks like the final tariffs on Chinese products are going to be 55%. And the Chinese tariffs on US products are going to be 10%. That's a huge win. We're coming out way ahead of where we were before the trade war started. So that is fantastic. And how did we get here? How did they arrive at this negotiated settlement, which is now going to President Xi for his approval and President Trump for his approval? The Chinese used rare earth minerals as their number one leverage point. How did China become the world dominating country in rare earth minerals? It used to be America. We used to be the ones that dominated in rare earth minerals. China went out to a lot of different countries, mostly in Africa. They dug up and transported a lot of that material back to China for processing. We outsourced it to China over the last 20, 30 years. Said, oh, why should we be doing it here? They're going to do it there for cheaper. And this is the key point in the entire tariff war. And this is the most important thing to note, is that we used to be the number one producer of rare earth minerals. China came along and started doing it cheaper. We then said, why should we be doing it here? Let them do it there. And then when there was a war, let's call it the trade war, but this could have been a real war, China said, you're going to get cut off from these rare earth minerals. And we said, uh-oh, we're relying on that for all of our electric cars, for all of our iPhones, for our military equipment. We need that. So that's what brought the US back to the table. That was the biggest leveraging factor. And this is what China does with everything. They might make sofas or phones or TVs or refrigerators, washing machines, anything cheaper than we used to produce it here at home. But then they have the leverage. They could jack the prices up when they want to, or they could cut us off from it, which is why when Trump talks about bringing manufacturing back to the US, it is really important. It is, some of it is national security important. So we need to do that. We need to absolutely bring this stuff back home. Reshore is what we need to do. And thank God that this tariff war is coming to an end and America is coming out on top. And over the next, say, 10, 15 years, we're going to reshore a lot of the stuff that we need to go to them for, especially PPE and the stuff that we need in case of emergency.
Well said. I want to go to you, Golan, with 2 points about obviously what he just said, if he has changed your mind at all. But I also think for people that are not familiar, Golan's been in the movie industry for close to 30 years. And the last Top Gun, they refused, Jerry Bruckheimer had balls the size of Bayonne for not, for allowing the Taiwanese flag on his jacket, and China didn't play the movie. And what a lot of people don't realize, Golan, is at any point, China could just cut off whatever it is, right? No Netflix, no movies, no basketball games. And America has basically allowed them to hijack us and to hold us hostage to all of their demands. So to Men's point, we're winning that, but we also have to be really careful with how much we allow them to control financially of us and everybody else in the world.
Absolutely. And I want to explain what you're talking about really quickly, because I don't think everybody knows that story about Top Gun Maverick. So in the original Top Gun, Tom Cruise, Maverick, wears a jacket, and on the jacket is the Japanese flag and the Taiwanese flag. My wife is half Taiwanese, so I happen to be real sensitive to this particular issue, and that is that China doesn't believe Taiwan is a separate country. They believe that it is part of China, to the point where the UN doesn't allow Taiwan to act as a separate country. And I don't know if you remember, but a number of years ago, as if I wasn't sure if the WHO were a corrupt organization, they went out of their way, despite Taiwan having more breakthroughs when it came to COVID, they went out of their way to not give any credit, to not mention them. And on a call with an official from the WHO, when it was brought up, he literally pretended his headphones weren't working and then hung up the phone in order to not talk about Taiwan. So this is a big deal. One of the investors in Top Gun Maverick is a Chinese company named Tencent. Tencent, huge, billions of dollars. And they were throwing it around because they were also able to say, if you do these concessions in your movie to make sure that it's comfortable for China. Some of that had to do with censorship, ghosts, and about sexuality and other stuff, but some of it had to do with politics. This was a political one. They said on his jacket, remove the Japanese flag, remove the Taiwanese flag. They're sensitive to us, and that Taiwanese flag is an abomination. And if you don't do that, we're going to pull our financing. That's a lot of money. And Jerry Bruckheimer, as Judah pointed out, basically said, why don't you go fuck yourselves? And when you watch the movie, you will see that the original patches, Taiwan and Japan, are restored on the jacket. They are there. And Tencent did pull their funding, and it didn't matter. And it also was the movie that saved the theatrical experience, so everyone can suck.
Beautifully said. And this story just came out and it's amazing. And this goes to what we always say. After they report a story, the retraction means nothing. The damage has already been done. And Mend, I love your knowledge and your relentlessness on the tariff conversation. I give you a lot of credit for that. But the CBO today finds that the big, beautiful bill raises household incomes by cutting taxes. So after all the dumping on the big, beautiful bill by everybody on the left and many old school Republicans, the story is proven not to be true by the CBO, man.
Good on the CBO for getting it right this time. There's a lot in that bill, and I am excited to see this thing pass and enact savings for the Americans, taxpayers.
And the thing that's really important to remember is that while we were warned in the most catastrophic terms possible, in the most hyperbolic, hair on fire terms possible, that we were going to experience an economic holocaust because Trump was bringing back tariffs. And by the way, I will say I was the skeptical one. Of the three of us, I was the skeptical one, but I always had one foot in the other side saying, but if it works, great, because I don't mind tariffs if they are being used for a purpose. I do not love tariffs just as a general thing to throw out for no reason. And I said, as long as he's got a purpose, then I'm behind it. Ultimately, his purpose becomes clear. The inflation crisis everyone warned about, this was gospel, by the way. This was fact. This was not like, this is a possibility. This is exactly what's happening. So I'm going to make this very quick, but there's a thing called producer price inflation. Producer price inflation is basically the amount of money that people who produce goods and services have to pay before it gets to the consumer. That is the way you truly see if inflation is going to come. The assumption was that it was going to skyrocket. And as of today, it is at 0.1%. That's half of what was expected. And that means that it truly was tariff derangement syndrome. And it just got obliterated by RIA.
Tariffs were used as a tool. It was a great tool. And when he ratcheted it up on China and forced them to come back to the table, they did have leverage with their rare earth minerals, but he forced them to come back to the table. We buy a lot more from China than they buy from us, and that determines who has the upper hand. Same thing with Canada. We buy a lot more from Canada than they buy from us. They should remove all tariffs on U.S. goods, and then we could, get back to the negotiating table. Same thing with Europe.
As we're wrapping up, really find this remarkable because I'm getting to listen to this and everybody else is getting to listen to this, and I really gain knowledge. Douglas Murray brought up a great point, and he said, everybody's talking about Ukraine now and natural minerals. And he's like, nobody knows what natural minerals are. And we're getting into this debate. Mend actually knows about natural minerals. Golan actually knows about China and the intricacies of filmmaking and all these different things. So I love that we get not a different take, but the right take here, because you guys are actually knowledgeable about what you're talking about, which is something very different than you will hear on any other show. And that's why we are a motley crew together. As we're wrapping up, the other day, who lives in Barcelona, was supposed to go to a Guns N' Roses concert, and he could not find a babysitter. And it made me realize how different it is from where you're living than in America, where you could find an app immediately. You are missing out on certain things. So you sacrifice this amazing life you have go on for those little hiccups sometimes. Is that worth it?
Well, let me correct you. I actually have access to everything here that I have access to there, with the exception of Neosporin, Advil, and Band-Aids. Whenever anyone comes to visit, those are the only three things I ask for, and occasionally Dayquil. No, actually, they have all that here. I'm an elitist kind of shithead that I speak so many languages in the house with the kids. We have Hebrew and English and Chinese and Russian and Spanish and Catalan. And my son is starting school in a German-only school in a couple of months. So we decided to use babysitters basically to increase language absorption. So it means we pay more, and it means we have to be really selective about who we get. We can use apps, we just don't do it because we're elitists. I hate to say it, but it's true.
Well, at least you're honest about it. And the last thing I want to get to is last night, Mend was in the supermarket. And this is what I love about Mend. He will confront anybody. Man, please share that story.
So in my town, there was a measure that was up for vote by all the residents. And two things were on the ballot. One was to enact a 20+ parental oversight board to review what books go into the library. And the second thing was whether or not to privatize the library. So there was a woman who came to my house advocating for this thing, saying, we don't want this. It's been great up until now. Why should we change? And I said, what do you mean, why should we change? Have you seen what's going on across the country? And she goes, no. I said, so you're out here spending your valuable time trying to convince people not to vote for something, and you don't even know what you're talking about? You don't know what you're advocating for or against? She goes, well, they're going to have the right to ban books, and we don't want to ban books. I said, ban what books? What are we talking about? Do you think there should be porn in the library? And she goes, no, there's no porn in the library. I said, not yet. Across the country, there's been all kinds of books that are inappropriate for kids introduced into the school libraries and to the public libraries. Is that what you want? And she goes, that's not happening. It's not. I said, well, here's evidence. There are people that have recorded videos. There's this one pastor that I love showing. So at the end of that conversation, this nice woman, and we were very cordial with each other, she's left saying, you should probably vote for that parental oversight board.
Good for you for making everybody pay attention to the truth.
It's what responsible parenting is all about. It's what we should all be doing. We should be confronting these people. What she actually did was she called me MAGA. Like, as if you could just label someone something and then you don't even need to engage. You don't need to hear the other side. You don't need to do any of it. And that's how she got put out on the street. That organization that was advocating for that has signs all up over our town. Don't let MAGA destroy our library by having a parental oversight board check which books go in. And I looked at some of these books. I downloaded the list of 100 and some odd books that they want to ban, and they are all softcore porn with a lot of gay and trans stories of rape and incest. Very graphic. It's disgusting that they would try to share that with children. It's fine for adults. These stories probably need to be told so that people could know, fix, deal with these issues, but not children. So yes, I push back fearlessly. I don't care.
On that note, I want to thank everybody that's been downloading the show on Apple, Spotify. Don't forget, follow us at The Daily Cheat Sheet on Substack, The Daily Cheat Sheet on YouTube. Go to YouTube, subscribe. It's fun. You get to see how good looking Golan is and how raggedy men could be oftentimes. And it's just enjoyable. I love how Golan edits and does the fixes. So please go to these sites and subscribe. It's for fun and for free. We're never going to solicit you for anything. And most importantly, we have to thank our Mexican listeners, because apparently we have a lot of them, and New Zealand. So New Zealand, thank you. Mexico, thank you. Canada, continue to listen to us, build us back up in the rankings. Thank you all. And on that note, good morning, afternoon, and evening world, wherever you are.